Hi everybody, I'm Christy. I'm a speech language pathologist and a voice specialist. So I also have spasmodic dysphonia myself. So today I'm going to just go through some helpful techniques that could be really beneficial right now because everybody's pretty much experiencing some higher vocal demands and higher vocal challenges with everything going on right now. So I completely understand that from both a professional standpoint and from a personal standpoint, having a voice disorder. So I will show you techniques that both I've found really helpful myself in managing symptoms, but also really well-known voice techniques that could be really helpful for managing any voice disorder or really helping to manage your day-to-day symptoms. So I'll start by saying a few caveats that I always go through. The first caveat is that you should always be working with a speech language pathologist in doing any voice techniques or voice therapy. You want to make sure that you're doing the techniques correctly and that you know what you're trying to feel when you're doing the techniques, and that also you're working your way up to how to shift your voice. So you might try these techniques, and if they're helpful, that's really great. But we also want to be learning how to eventually shift those into how you're shifting the way that you're conversing, the way that you're using your voice conversationally. The second caveat I'll say is that these techniques are really not designed to cure anything. So if you have something neurological like spasmodic dysphonia or vocal tremor, these techniques are really meant to help manage those symptoms rather than specifically cure the underlying disorder. So I'll show you some helpful voice techniques. I'll also go through some general vocal hygiene tips and some general really tips to keep your voice healthy. But again, these are not designed to be curative. They're really designed to help you manage these increased speaking demands that we have now. So right now you're maybe experiencing some more vocal challenges, right? I think it's challenging right now for anybody speaking wise, whether or not you have a voice disorder. And if you have a voice disorder, something like spasmodic dysphonia, tremor, MTD, or any sort of voice disorder, it's even that much more challenging right now. So I'll start off by going through some vocal hygiene. So right now we're speaking through masks, we're speaking at a distance, we're speaking possibly through some barriers, which could be N95s, through face shields, through plexiglass, right? So there's a lot of increased barriers that we have, a lot of increased challenges that we have for speaking. So we want to make sure that we're following proper vocal hygiene to keep our voice healthy in general. And then I'll actually demonstrate some voice techniques after that. So for vocal hygiene, you want to make sure that you're staying well hydrated. A good estimation is about 60 to 80 ounces per day. That alone will probably not take away your voice challenges, right? But we want to make sure that we're keeping our vocal mechanism, our larynx, really healthy. So if you're feeling increased mucus production, especially throat clearing, you want to make sure that you're definitely staying well hydrated. The other thing with vocal hygiene is you want to really try to avoid throat clearing or coughing. So yes, there's physiological reasons why we might be coughing, and that's okay, and sometimes a cough is needed. But if you're finding yourself repeatedly throat clearing or coughing, you definitely want to take note of that and definitely get an evaluation from a speech pathologist and an otolaryngologist to see what could be really underlying all of that. But if you're feeling kind of the tickle in your throat, irritation in your throat, instead of engaging in that throat clear, you can try to take a sip of water and do a hard swallow. So a slightly more effortful swallow when you take a sip of water rather than engaging in the throat clear. And that can really decrease some of the trauma that you're adding to your vocal folds when you're engaging in that throat clear behavior. So another thing to note is just if your throat clearing is really increasing as you continue to talk. So that could be a sign of actually laryngeal irritation, and maybe just the fact that you're using your voice in a less than efficient way. So if you're feeling like you're talking maybe for a longer duration of time and you really feel that urge to throat clear, that tickle in your throat, you want to really make note of that. Again, try the sip hard swallow, but it's likely also an indication that we need to shift some things in the way that you're using your voice. And I'll kind of show some techniques to help with that today. You also want to avoid really shouting or yelling in any way. That's pretty traumatic for vocal folds. Now, we are really having to project a lot more right now. So we're having to use our voice in a different way, in a louder way, whether that's through virtual calls or speaking at a distance or speaking through a mask. Projection is definitely something that we have to do more of now. But you want to make sure that it's projection in a healthy way and not projection that is really pushing or shouting. So if you're ever feeling strain in your throat, effort in your throat, that you're really having to push to be louder or push to be heard, we really want to try to shift that. And I will demonstrate a technique to do that, but just be mindful of really not trying to shout to get your voice out or to get people to hear you. There are definitely more effective ways to get your voice out or to be heard. So definitely take note of those behaviors. In terms of reflux, we want to just make sure that you're modifying, not having a ton of spicy food, reflux-inducing foods or drinks. That could always be more irritating to the vocal folds, especially during a time of increased vocal demands. If you are doing a lot of phone talking or virtual calls, I always recommend headphones. So they have really great headsets that you can buy that actually have microphones that come in front of your mouth. Those are really, really helpful and really great, especially if you're kind of in front of the computer doing virtual meetings, virtual Zoom calls all day. Those are really great. I like just the Apple headphones, which are also really helpful. This one has a microphone right here, so I can speak into that. It helps direct my voice into this, but also prevents me from really pushing my voice because I have something to speak into, a microphone that's right here. So speaking with one headphone in is actually really helpful too in modulating how loud you're being. So if I had two headphones in, it's actually a lot harder for me to gauge how loud I'm being. And I can't really gauge how much I'm pushing or projecting. Versus if I have one headphone in, it's actually a lot easier for me to gauge how loud I'm being and really be able to modulate my voice a lot better and get a much better feedback as to how I'm using my voice. So if you have a headset, definitely use it. And then I would definitely recommend one headphone in and just see. And you can even compare the two headphones in versus one and see how that works for you. Amplification is also something that I frequently recommend. So you can look into what's called voice amplifiers. And basically those are little microphone systems that just give your voice a little bit of a boost. So if you're feeling like you're frequently having to push, or maybe you have ABSD, the breathy type, where you feel like you're just not getting a lot of volume and people really are having trouble hearing you, efficient projection is going to be one thing that's really helpful, but also you can look into voice amplifiers to just give yourself a little bit of a boost without necessarily having to work so hard to get there. It's just amplifies your voice just a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit so that you can use them on virtual calls. You can use them in certain contexts like speaking in front of a group. And what it'll do is just give your voice, again, that just slight amplification to help. Especially for teachers, if any of you are teachers that are going back perhaps into a distance classroom, you're going to probably be projecting a lot more or maybe pushing your voice a lot more to be heard. So definitely consider getting a voice amplifier. If you have any questions about what that is or what kind of voice amplifier to be looking for, email me and I can help kind of guide you in the right direction. I can put my email in at the end. So if you have any questions or need some extra guidance on that, please feel free to email me. So that's kind of a good start for vocal hygiene and really making sure that we're not overly pushing or straining our voice. You also want to consider vocal dosing. So by that, I mean making sure that you're appropriately taking vocal breaks and not just kind of continuously speaking through the whole day. You don't want to be speaking for 4 or 5 hours straight without any vocal resets or vocal rests. So if you are somebody who has high vocal demands, right, or you're kind of having to speak all day for your job or socialization, you want to make sure that you're taking intermittent breaks, right? So maybe take a 2-minute break even between meetings. If you have back-to-back meetings or back-to-back phone calls, taking that 2-minute break to just do kind of a vocal reset. I'll go into that a little bit later, what that looks like, but to be able to reset your voice a little bit or just take a little bit of a break and a rest is really helpful sometimes. So be mindful of not just kind of continuing to talk and talk and talk. When you feel vocal fatigue or anything in your throat, definitely take that as a sign that you're pushing your voice too much and your muscles are definitely working a little bit too hard. So you want to back off a little bit, see if you can get a more efficient production of your voice. Again, I'll show you strategies to do that, but you want to be mindful of what you're feeling when you're speaking. So take those breaks. Make sure you're not really just pushing through any vocal fatigue, because that's just going to compound and make things a little bit worse. If you have vocal fatigue, rest your voice, or again, engage in some of these vocal resets that I'll show you in a little bit. So to jump into some of the voice techniques, again, you definitely want to be working with a speech language pathologist on these techniques, because it's really helpful to know what you're looking for, to be able to tweak certain things about how you're doing the techniques, and then also to be able to work towards how do you feel those same sensations in really how you're shifting the way that you're speaking. So by that, I mean, you could be speaking in your throat and really try to kind of push your voice out a lot, right? And I'm using a lot of effort there from the muscles here, versus if I'm focused on shifting my voice a little bit forward, it becomes a lot easier. And I'm using my voice in a much more efficient way that's really not causing me to feel anything in my throat. So we want to be mindful of how we're using your voice. One thing that can be really helpful for that is called a resonant hum. So resonant hums are basically a training gesture or a technique to feel your voice a little bit more forward. So it gets your voice into a really efficient vibration pattern, right? How your vocal folds are vibrating is really efficient when you do a resonant hum, but it also teaches you how to shift your voice forward and how to start to feel your voice here rather than so much in your throat. So again, what I demonstrated, you can speak here, or you can start to feel that resonance and that buzziness forward, and you can start to speak from here, which is a lot easier and actually allows you to get more projection with less effort and less work. So I'll demonstrate what that looks like. You're going to do just a hum, like you're going to hum a song, normal pitch and normal loudness, and you try to feel a lot of vibration and a lot of sensation moving forward. So if I did that, I'm going to aim to get a lot of vibration out my lips or my nose. Feel a lot of sensation here. Feel a lot of buzz, and I feel nothing in my throat, right? It's pretty easy for me to do that because I feel everything up here and nothing is coming from my throat. I'm not pushing to do that. If I was pushing, it would be, right? It would be kind of that same squeeze that I feel. I'm trying to get that really easy vibration. You need to be using efficient breath flow in order to get this. So make sure if it's not feeling easy for you that you're not holding your breath. If you hold your breath and you try to do that, right, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get to that sound. Again, you're really trying to direct it forward. Not necessarily high. You want to keep it at a typical pitch for you, but just getting those vibrations super forward to where you actually feel that feedback on your lips. So eventually we work on how to feel that feeling really forward, and then how to speak from there, right? So then how do you make your sounds all from here rather than down here? So you can turn that into then, doing some words, some M words. So you get the hum here, and then you go into a sound, right? So me, right? I'm getting that vibration forward. Me. I'm feeling all the vibration here, nothing really in my throat at all. Eventually we turn that into conversation, right? How are we getting all these different speech sounds, but still maintaining a really forward focus? So that's how resonant hums can work and be really helpful in getting your voice out of your throat. Resonant hums can be a really great reset technique like I mentioned. So if you're having any sort of symptoms like irritation in your throat, really a lot of effort to speak or be heard, or you're pushing your voice, you want to be doing some resonant hums to try to kind of reset your voice and get the focus back up here rather than so much in your throat. You can also use them as a voice warm-up technique, right? So I frequently use these as a warm-up technique. So I'll do them in the morning, for instance, before I have my long speaking days. So I'll do some resonant hums and just feel that feeling up front. So I know that my voice is going to be already set for when I have to do my talking throughout the day. You can try different versions of that hum, right? So you can try a PsyHum, right? So you're trying to release that airflow. If you feel like the hum is just you're not getting that hum, it's not feeling easy, try to release some airflow with that. So, sometimes just that release of air helps to feel a little bit more of that vibration. You can try a right? You can try making that feel natural, but also feeling that vibration forward. And that's something you can even use in conversation, right? So you're on a Zoom call, you're on a phone call, and you just need to reset your voice because you really feel a lot in your throat. You can try an right, while you're listening to the person. That's a really subtle and creative way to get your voice back forward. So resonant hums are really, really helpful to think about when you have these increased vocal demands. Pay attention to how you're speaking, where that's coming from. You really want it to be coming more forward from here and feeling that vibration. Another helpful tool is called straw phonation. So straw phonation is a semi-occluded vocal tract technique, which means that it just creates a really efficient voice output, right? So it puts your larynx in a really great configuration to get a really efficient and easy voice output without you really having to work that hard at all. So the way this is done is with a straw. So you can take a straw and you're going to do actually basically the same thing that I just showed you with the resonant hum. So you're going to put the straw in between your lips, close your lips gently around the straw, and then you're going to try to go for that same hum feeling with just trying to get that vibration forward. So if I put the straw on my lips, I'll demonstrate what that sounds like. Feel vibration here. Almost feels a little bit like I'm playing a kazoo. Feel a lot of buzz. It feels like I'm doing the hum, but there's going to be sound traveling through the straw. So make sure you're not pushing through the straw, right? If you're doing, right, you're trying to push from your throat still, you're not going to feel that ease. This should feel pretty easy when you do this. So again, you're putting the straw in between your lips and not pushing at all, just trying to get that easy vibration again. Okay, so again, you should feel a lot of feedback here. That's easy vibration, and really not feel anything in your throat at all when you do this. One alteration to that I really love is doing it in water. So if you take a glass of water that's partially filled with water and you take a straw and you do that same thing, but you actually do it with the straw in a little bit of water, that's often really, really helpful for releasing some tension or for, again, putting your vocal folds in a really efficient pattern of vibration. So if I do that, it's going to sound like this. Right, so you actually see that there are bubbles being produced when I do that. So the bubbles are happening at the same time that I'm making that sound. You might actually feel that your voice feels a little bit more released after you do that. It might feel good while you're doing that. It should feel really easy. It should never feel like you're working to do this. So if you ever feel any sensation in here, if you ever feel like it's irritating, it's creating a tickle, or you're pushing to get that sound, you know you're not quite doing it as efficiently as you should be. So try to step back a little bit on the effort, or try to shift your focus a little bit more forward so you can get those nice easy bubbles coordinated with the sound. So if you're having difficulty coordinating this, go back to just a or make sure that you have airflow coming through the straw. That's another common thing I see, is that people try to just push the sound and there's little airflow that they're using. So you want to make sure that you're having air that's easy and really focusing on this forward vibration. So again, this technique, just like the resonant hums, can be a really great warm-up technique for your voice. This is one, having spasmodic dysphonia and having high vocal demands, that I myself use pretty frequently. So I will do this in between every virtual call that I have, every phone call, right? And it just gives me kind of that reset that I feel like really helps me to bring my voice back here, so I feel like it's easy again, and then I'm really not using my throat at all to speak. Again, it's a training gesture, right? So it's also used for then how do you translate that into how you're speaking. So pay attention to how your speaking feels maybe after you do that, and see if you can keep that a little bit longer. So see if you can really feel how maybe easy it is after you speak, after doing that, even just for a few minutes. And that's what we try to capitalize on, and then use your speaking voice in that way that you're feeling the same thing, ease and just that forward focus. So that's another thing that you can try to implement, especially with all these increased vocal demands. So I'll talk about projection. So projection is one of the most difficult things I think that a lot of people are facing right now, because we have the mask, we feel like we need to kind of be a lot louder, or our sound is just getting lost with kind of the barrier, or same thing with being 6 feet away, or any of the other barriers that I mentioned. Even virtual calls, right? We're having to kind of feel like we need to project a lot more, and we're probably using our voice a little bit more loudly than we should be, but we definitely do need to project. So what are healthy ways to be able to do that? Basically, you want to think about a combination of the resonance, so the forward focus of the voice that I was just talking about and showing you how to get to, that really, really forward focus. And then you also want to think about the breath. So if you have one of those but not the other, you're not going to get a great projection. If you focus on forward focus, but also focus on how you're using your breath, you can really project your voice without feeling stuff in your throat. So I'll demonstrate kind of how to get there. You want to think about those two things at once. So if you are pushing your voice to get louder, you're going to feel a lot in your throat. If you're using a lot of effort or a lot of muscle strain to get there, again, you're going to be feeling vocal fatigue. You're going to be feeling effort. You're going to be feeling like people still can't hear you, but that you're just working really hard. So something I like to do is kind of a technique to get you to build up to that projection. One way is to feel like you're almost sighing with your voice. So you want to feel like you're using that exhale properly. But again, you're really have a really strong focus forward. So if I'm in my throat at all when I'm doing that, it's still going to get lost in my throat. If I'm here, it can amplify a lot better and in a more efficient way. So if I take the word mean, right, and I try to do that and try to project that, I'm going to do buzz first, right? I feel strong buzz first. Mean, right? Then I'm trying to bring that into a projected version, mean, where I'm using a lot more breath flow to do that. I still don't feel anything in my throat when I'm being louder, right? If we do the word moon, same thing. I'm using kind of that elongated vowel, that exhale, to get my voice when I'm really focused forward. So again, if I do moon and I try to increase my volume a little bit, it's a lot easier than if I try to just push my voice out from here. So if we turn that into a sentence, we can do the sentence, meet me at noon. But again, I'm going to be trying to get it super forward and using that breath. So meet me at noon, meet me at noon. I'm really here, but I'm also using that breath to support my voice. So if I do meet me, that's in my throat. If I get it out of my throat and place it here, it's a lot easier for me to get. So two key factors here are the breath and then the forward focus of your voice. And that should help when you have situations like a mask. If you're speaking to somebody at a distance and you're feeling like they just can't hear you, think about those two concepts of how you're using your breath, maybe increase that breath flow, right? But also really focus it, maybe even towards your nose, but definitely at least towards your lips so that you're feeling actual vibration here when you're speaking. Another helpful tool is that you can start to articulate the sounds at your lips, right? So if I make my sounds really crisp and clear at my lips, it's a lot easier for people to hear me than it is if I'm kind of doing this and my voice is sinking in my throat and I'm not really clarifying and increasing the clarity of my speech sounds. Rather, if I do this and I'm bringing my voice forward, I'm using my breath, and I'm really actually clearly articulating those sounds, it's a lot easier to get my message across. It's going to be a lot easier for people to understand me. So slow down your speaking rate, get the clear over articulation, right? You're not using here to do that. It's just kind of that crisp, clear articulation at your lips, at your tongue, so that people can get an increase in the clarity of your speech and hear you a little bit better. You can cut through some of that background noise without you having to really work harder to do that. So those are some tips that could be helpful for resetting your voice, for dealing with lots of vocal demands or more vocal challenges right now. And then also for projection, right? Because we are having to project a lot more right now. So another thing to consider is the type of mask that you're using. So there's a number of different options for masks, and different ones can be really helpful for different purposes. So the NSDA has great options for masks that actually let people know what you're dealing with, right? So if you have a voice disorder, they have masks that actually say, I'm not sick, I have a voice disorder, which could be really helpful for, number one, spreading awareness and education, but also that people understand why perhaps you're having more voice difficulties. And so there's another one I think that says, bear with me, I have voice disorder. So people understand if it's taking you a little bit more effort or a little bit more time to get out your voice or get out your words, they'll understand why that is. So those are really great. Those are available on the NSDA website. If you're a person who loses a lot of air when you speak, or you're having breathing difficulties with speaking because you're losing that air, the surgical mask might be a good option for you. If you're having still breathing difficulties with those with speaking, you might want to try a KN95 that gives you a little bit more space in front of your mouth. Those might be helpful. The surgical mask could be helpful for projection. There's also some masks that have clear openings. There's pros and cons to that. I think they tend to fog up a little bit, but it could be helpful if you are a person who can benefit from somebody lip reading. But again, you know, spreading that awareness and letting people know that you have a voice disorder is always really helpful. You can even say that to somebody too. In addition to, you know, maybe getting the mask that says that, you can also try to explain that to people that you do have a voice disorder and that it might take you a little bit more effort or more time to try to get your words out. And they might be a little bit more willing to listen a little bit more, be a little bit more patient as you're trying to use your voice strategies or speak. So those are helpful tips that, you know, can start to change your voice over time, but also be a really good starting point for just kind of knowing how voice therapy could be really helpful, and vocal hygiene overall could be really helpful. Again, if you're doing these techniques, please work with a voice therapist or, you know, specialized speech language pathologist who is very familiar with voice and your voice disorder. You want to make sure, again, that you're not doing them incorrectly, that you're doing them in the right way. And again, working up to shifting your voice conversationally. Right now, virtual is still a great option. So if you're thinking that you might want to try these techniques, but you still can't get anywhere in person, or you don't feel comfortable with that, a lot of places still are, and a lot of providers still are offering virtual teletherapy. So definitely look into those options. If you have questions on whether you should see a speech pathologist, or how to find somebody specialized in your voice disorder or in your area, email me. So I'll give you my email here. It's my first name, Christie, so CHRISTIE DeLuca, DELUCA @gmail.com. So if you have any questions on anything really that I went over, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to point you in the right direction or further discuss what might be helpful for you. So feel free to email me. The NSDA also has a great healthcare listing, healthcare provider listing on their website. That's also where you can find the masks to purchase. So definitely go over to the dysphonia.org NSDA website. If you want more information and kind of a detailed written version of this, I also have a written version of this. I have a blog on my website that you can visit if you're really wanting to go back to some of these techniques or want other helpful tips. I have other helpful tips and go into more detail on some of these techniques too. So you can visit my blog. It's Speaking Boldly, so SPEAKING boldly BOLDLY.com/blog-1. If you just go to the regular website too, you can click on the blog link at the top. So you can find a lot more helpful tips and information there too for dealing with some of these voice demands, for how to tell others you even have a voice disorder. But you can get all of this information also written out there that could be really helpful. So again, any questions, please feel free to email me, and I hope all of this was helpful.